At least you'll stop loving a lie by Artisland X. Read by The Devil's Advocate 18. For most people, taking a shower is a soothing ritual, but that wasn't the case for Akutagawa Ryunosuke. To him, washing was a humiliating chore that confronted him with his own weakness. Rashoumon wasn't just a weapon, it was his only means of defense and his very identity. Undressing meant losing his strength, his worth, and his entire purpose. Like every night, he locked the bathroom door and removed his clothes quickly, eager to get the task over as soon as possible. Even though they had been dating for quite some time, he had never dared to reveal his naked body to Atsushi, not out of fear of being attacked, but out of his own insecurities. "It's not fair if I'm the only one who's undressed," Atsushi teased a few days earlier. His tone was light and playful, but there was a hint of sincerity. Akutagawa couldn't understand. When he asked him why, his boyfriend had simply replied, "Because I want to admire you," as if that should have been obvious. Akutagawa caught sight of himself in the mirror. The image repulsed him, but instead of looking away as he usually did, he forced himself to look closer, analyzing every inch of skin, searching for anything that could be admirable. He found nothing. His body had nothing to offer. His thin muscles were barely enough to support his weight. His rib cage stood out too sharply, enclosing defective lungs. But the worst part were his scars, carved reminders of his defeats. In his coat, in the eyes of the world, he inspired terror. His weapon was feared, and his ability to wield was respected. But no one had ever paid attention to Akutagawa for what was beneath it all. How could he blame them, after all? He was nothing without Rashoumon. He stepped into the shower, hoping to silence his thoughts. Instead, his mind drifted to Atsushi, who was reading in the living room. Akutagawa knew his partner's love was genuine, but he couldn't accept the fact it was because Atsushi didn't know the whole truth. He had never seen him powerless. He feared that if Atsushi saw his fragile side of him, his love would vanish, and the thought alone was unbearable. Atsushi existed apart from his ability. With or without the tiger, he remained strong and determined. Akutagawa wished he could do the same. He turned the water temperature to the lowest setting. The ice water that slid over his skin stung in a form of punishment. He hoped the pain could make up for his unworthiness. He noticed a new bottle of shampoo among the others. That explained why Atsushi had smelled different lately, but Akutagawa wasn't complaining. The scent suited him perfectly. He picked it up, opened the cap, and inhaled the sweet fragrance. A comforting vanilla scent filled his lungs, but unfortunately this comfort got interrupted by a familiar sensation. "Oh no, I'm an idiot." He began coughing uncontrollably. He crouched down, desperately trying to squeeze in a few breaths between the spasms, but to no avail. His lungs were expelling air relentlessly. His vision blurred. Suddenly, he heard a voice at the door. "Ryu, are you okay?" He wanted to answer, to reassure him, but he couldn't utter a single word. The room began to spin, and the last thing he heard was the crash of the door being forced open. Akutagawa opened his eyes to the sight of Atsushi, who was firmly holding his shoulders, setting him against the wall. "Ryu, can you hear me? Are you okay?" Atsushi asked, sounding worried. His throat burned too much to speak, so he simply nodded. His breathing was steadied, but his lungs ached and his diaphragm was sore. Atsushi took his hand and held it gently. "You're scaring me. I feel like it's getting worse." Indeed, Akutagawa's condition had worsened, but before he could begin to worry about it, a realization struck him. Atsushi had seen him completely exposed. Panic seized him. He tore his hand free and curled up, drawing his legs to his chest. When he noticed the bathroom door broken off its hinges, anger flared through his emotions. "You broke the door? Seriously?" "Yeah, is that what you're worried about? Ryu, you fainted. You were coughing so hard. I couldn't just stand there." "So what? You should've." "I was doing just fine on my own. I don't need your help," Akutagawa retorted in a hoarse voice. He lowered his eyes to avoid Atsushi's gaze, fearing it might be filled with pity. How dare he invade my privacy for such a trivial thing. Before Atsushi could respond, he said, "Go away. Leave me alone, Atsushi." Atsushi's expression hardened. "No, that's enough. You keep refusing to talk about your health, but we can't keep ignoring this anymore." "Get out!" Akutagawa cut him off, pushing his hoarse voice to the limit. He glared at him with the same look he once had when he wanted him dead. Atsushi froze, and without a word he stood up and left. Finally, Akutagawa sighed with relief. He could think about the situation in peace. He stood up slowly, leaning against the wall for balance. Although he hated to admit it, Atsushi was right. His condition was worrisome. He had experienced some dizziness after a coughing fit, but this was the first time he'd fainted. The situation terrified him far more than he'd let on. However, a different concern consumed his mind. Atsushi had seen him completely naked, and even worse, he had seen him unconscious. His heart sank at the thought that their relationship would never be the same again. Atsushi undoubtedly felt deeply disgusted by what he had seen. From now on, his lover would only see the fragile boy hidden beneath the powerful man. There was no way he could still love him after this, and it was too late to undo. He dressed silently, trying to hold back his tears. He lost Atsushi. He lost the person he loved most, and all because of his fragile body that he couldn't handle. A simple scent of vanilla. How pathetic. I'm pathetic. Once dressed, he felt slightly better. Rashoumon gently wrapped herself around his shoulders, her way of hugging him. That evening, Atsushi tried several times to start a conversation, but Akutagawa ignored him completely. He was far too ashamed to look him in the eye. Atsushi hadn't once mentioned the incident, but he could feel it lingering between them. And yet, he felt some kind of relief. At least now, Atsushi knew the truth. He could stop loving a lie. It's fairer this way, he told himself. As he did every night after Atsushi had gone to bed, Akutagawa sat down in his reading chair. On the table, a surprise waited for him, a fig ice cream bowl, and a note that read, "I thought this might help your throat. I don't really understand why you've been avoiding me, but I hope I haven't done anything to hurt you. If anything is bothering you, please let me know. I'm here for you. Love you." Akutagawa stared at the note, a smile spreading across his face. As he ate the ice cream, a memory resurfaced. A few months earlier, he had made Atsushi try the same flavor, after raving about it for weeks. But after taking his spoonful, he nearly spat it out with a grimace. He muttered something about his terrible tastes. Akutagawa had retorted that his palate was underdeveloped as that of a toddler who had never eaten anything but rice. Since this wasn't far from the truth, Atsushi had burst out laughing, a wonderful laugh that Akutagawa would have given everything to hear again. The sweetness of the fig turned bitter at the thought of their relationship was ruined forever. He reread the note over and over, lingering on the last two words for a second. He wondered if Atsushi truly meant them, but his thoughts were quickly silenced by another, stronger voice. "He's lying. He pities you. Don't get your hopes up. It's safer that way." Hours later, Akutagawa set his book down on the shelf. Quietly, he entered the bedroom and saw Atsushi asleep. With a sad expression on his face, he thought back to how he had treated him that night, and regret washed over him. He sat beside his partner. Atsushi stirred, and his eyes opened slightly. Unable to ignore him any longer, Akutagawa whispered the only words he could utter, "I'm sorry." Atsushi responded with a tired smile, reached for his wrist, and pulled him closer. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around him. His warmth began to melt away his doubts. Perhaps, after all, as absurd as it seems, Atsushi still loved him just as much. This was At Least You'll Stop Loving a Lie by Artisland X, read by The Devil's Advocate 18. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time.